Hey guys, tonight we delve into the quiet, vulnerable space between waking and sleeping, and the terrifying notion that we might not be alone in it. We're exploring a case where the sterile, controlled environment of a scientific study was breached by something utterly inexplicable. Imagine being tucked into a monitored bed, every breath and heartbeat recorded, believing you're in the safest room possible, only to be jolted awake by the frantic voice of the researcher on the intercom, a voice steeped in pure terror, asking, "Wake up, who is that other person in the room with you?" This event peels back the comforting blanket of scientific certainty to reveal a chilling, unfathomable abyss beneath. It forces us to confront the profound, lingering question of what truly watches us when our eyes are closed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. When you're done, post your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world the darkness finds us all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all started, as these things so often do, with a simple piece of paper. You'd seen it tacked to a crowded corkboard in the student union, nestled between ads for used textbooks and a plea for a new drummer in a band that probably wouldn't last the semester. The flyer was printed on a calming, almost clinical shade of blue paper. Volunteers needed for university sleep study. The headline read, in a clean, sans serif font. It promised a modest payment, enough to cover groceries for a couple of weeks. But more than that, it promised the possibility of answers. You hadn't been sleeping well for months. It wasn't the dramatic, thrashing in bed kind of insomnia you see in movies. It was a quiet, creeping exhaustion, a feeling of being unrested, no matter how many hours you logged. Sometimes you'd wake with a strange, lingering sense of pressure on your chest, which you'd long ago dismissed as anxiety about exams or your future. The flyer seemed like a sign, a practical, logical step. This wasn't some back alley mystic with tarot cards. This was the university's renowned psychology department. It was science. It was data and analysis and peer-reviewed conclusions. The process of signing up only reinforced that feeling of safety and legitimacy. You filled out a multi-page questionnaire online, ticking boxes that chronicled your nightly struggles. Do you wake feeling tired? Often. Do you recall your dreams? Rarely. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? You hesitated on that one. You remembered a few terrifying episodes years ago, waking up unable to move, a dark weight pressing down, but you convinced yourself it was just a nightmare, a trick of a tired mind. You ticked numb. Your initial consultation was in the Kellerman building, a modern, somewhat sterile structure of glass and brushed steel on the far side of campus. It felt removed from the old ivy-covered halls that gave the university its Gothic charm. As you walked the long, quiet corridor to the sleep lab, you passed by a chatty custodian pushing a squeaky cart. He nodded to you and mentioned offhandedly to his younger colleague, "This wing always gives me the creeps after sundown. The wiring in these new buildings always makes the hairs on your arms stand up." You smiled politely, chalking it up to the kind of folklore that attaches itself to any old institution, a way to make the mundane feel more interesting. You forgot about it almost instantly. The lead researcher, a Dr. Alistair Finch, was a man whose own appearance suggested a long-standing feud with sleep. He had tired eyes, but they were sharp and focused, and he spoke with a gentle, reassuring cadence. He explained the study's parameters. They were researching minor, undocumented sleep anomalies in healthy adults, looking for subtle patterns that might precede more significant disorders. It's a documented fact that millions of people suffer from conditions like sleep apnea or periodic limb movement disorder without ever being diagnosed, their exhaustion simply becoming a baseline for their life. Dr. Finch explained that by monitoring subjects like you, they hoped to identify biomarkers that could lead to earlier detection. You were helping people, you were contributing to science, and you were getting paid. It felt like a perfect, logical transaction. He walked you through the observation room, a space dominated by monitors and complex-looking machinery that hummed with a low, steady energy. Then he showed you the sleeping chamber itself, It was small, Spartan, and clean. A single bed with crisp white sheets, a small table, and a camera mounted high in the corner of the room. An intercom speaker was set into the wall above the headboard. "This is a completely sealed environment," Dr. Finch explained, his voice calm and professional. "The door is locked from the outside. The ventilation is a closed system. Nothing gets in or out. We will be right here, monitoring you all night. You're perfectly safe." That word, safe, echoed in the small, soundproofed room. It felt true. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, this little chamber was a controlled variable, a place where every factor was known, measured, and accounted for. You felt a sense of relief wash over you. Here, in this sterile box, under the watchful eye of science, you could finally let your guard down. You could finally just sleep. And maybe, just maybe, they would find a simple, scientific explanation for the fatigue that dogged your days and the occasional fleeting sense of pressure in the dead of night. As you prepared to leave, scheduling your first session for the following week, you felt a flicker of something you hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It begs the question, doesn't it? At what point does our faith in the controlled, observable world become a vulnerability? When we hand over our trust to the systems designed to protect us, we rarely consider the possibility that those systems might be the very first to witness something that defies all explanation, leaving us utterly and completely exposed. The following week, you return to the Kellerman building as dusk bleeds across the sky, turning the glass facade into a dark mirror reflecting a bruised, purple twilight. There's a quiet sense of purpose to your movements. You are no longer just a tired student. You are a participant, a data point, a small cog in the grand machine of scientific discovery. The long, sterile corridor seems less daunting this time, its silence less oppressive and more clinical. Dr. Finch greets you with that same tired but gentle expression. There's no trace of unease in his demeanor, just the quiet professionalism of a man beginning his night's work. He guides you through the process of preparation, which is far more involved than you had imagined. You sit in a comfortable chair in the observation room as a technician. A young graduate student named Ben, with focused, careful hands, begins to attach the sensors. He dabs small, cool spots on your scalp with a gritty gel before affixing the electrodes for the EEG, which will map the electrical symphony of your brain. More sensors are placed near your eyes to track their rapid movements during REM sleep, and across your chest to monitor the steady, rhythmic percussion of your heart and lungs. You feel a strange sense of detachment as they work, as if your body is merely a vessel to be wired and readied for its journey. You are being plugged in, becoming part of the very system that hummed around you. The experience is intimate, yet profoundly impersonal. This objective cataloging of your biological functions is a documented part of any polysomnography. It's the standard, globally accepted procedure for understanding what happens when the conscious mind gives way. Once the wiring is complete, a mesh cap is placed over your head to hold it all in place. You feel like a character in a science fiction film, a traveler about to be sent into some strange new dimension. Dr. Finch leads you into the sleeping chamber. The crisp white sheets have been turned down, an invitation into the heart of the experiment. You lie down, and Ben carefully gathers the bundle of wires, plugging them into a port on the wall near the headboard. "Just try to relax and sleep as you normally would, Doctor," Finch's voice says, already slightly distant from the doorway. "We'll be right here." And then, with a soft click, the heavy, soundproof door swings shut. It locks with a solid, definitive thump. The silence that follows is absolute. It is a physical presence, a weight in the air. The low hum of the university, the distant traffic, the whisper of the ventilation, all gone. All that remains is the internal soundtrack of your own existence. You can hear the blood pulsing in your ears, a soft, whooshing beat. You can hear the gentle in and out of your own breath. It is a level of quiet few people in the modern world ever experience. In this void, your mind, starved for input, starts to play tricks. There's a well-documented psychological phenomenon where, in a state of profound sensory deprivation, The brain begins to generate its own stimuli. People in anechoic chambers report hearing phantom whispers, music, or footsteps, their own mind desperately trying to fill the silence. You close your eyes and wonder if the faint ringing you perceive is real, or just the ghost of a sound your brain has conjured. In the control room, however, there is a sound, or rather the image of one. As you drift from the relaxed alpha waves of wakefulness into the theta waves of early-stage sleep, Ben leans closer to his monitor. He's watching the audio spectrogram, a visual representation of the sound spectrum in the room. He points. "Hey, Dr. Finch, you seeing this?" Alistair Finch leans over. There, on the screen, is a persistent, thin line, glowing faintly at the very bottom of the display. It's a frequency of around 19 Hz, a deep, subaudible hum that exists just below the threshold of human hearing. It's what is known as infrasound. It's not loud, but it is constant. "Is that the HVAC?" Ben asks. "Shouldn't be," Finch murmurs, his eyes narrowing. The lab's ventilation is specifically shielded to operate above the 20 Hz line to avoid this exact kind of interference. He taps a few keys, bringing up the building's schematics and the lab's own diagnostic readings. The HVAC is stable. The massive server banks in the basement have their own acoustic dampening. None of the equipment in the building, according to the multi-million-dollar design specifications, should be producing a rogue 19 Hz frequency. He thinks of the work of engineer Vic Tandy from the late 1992, who famously traced the haunting of his laboratory to a newly installed fan that was generating a standing wave of infrasound. Tandy's team had been experiencing all the classic signs of a ghostly presence, a pervasive sense of unease, cold spots, and even fleeting visual apparitions at the edge of their sight. The cause wasn't paranormal, it was physics. The low-frequency vibrations were resonating with their eyeballs, causing smeared, gray shapes to appear in their peripheral vision. Dr. Finch is a man of science. He doesn't believe in ghosts, but he also believes in his instruments. He makes a note in the log. Unidentified, persistent, low-frequency audio anomaly. 19.2 Hz. Source unknown. Monitor for duration. For now, it is just another piece of data, an unexplained variable that needs to be controlled for. It could be a new piece of equipment someone installed in a neighboring lab. It could be a flaw in their own sensors. It's a puzzle, not a threat. Through the rest of the night, your sleep progresses normally. You cycle through the stages, from light sleep to deep restorative delta wave sleep, and into the vivid theater of REM. Your heart rate is steady, your breathing is even. From all outward appearances, the first night is a perfect baseline. When you wake, you feel surprisingly refreshed. The heavy door opens, and the sounds of the world rush back in. Dr. Finch greets you with a pleasant, if non-committal, smile as Ben carefully unplugs you from the wall. He asks how you slept, and you tell him, honestly, that it was better than you've slept in weeks. He says nothing of the audio anomaly. Why introduce a variable that could influence your next session? Your perception is part of the experiment, after all. You leave the Kellerman building and step out into the bright morning, feeling confident and relieved. The process works. Science works. But this leaves a profound question lingering in the silence of that sealed room. When our most sensitive instruments begin to detect something that shouldn't be there, something without a logical or mechanical source, what are they actually recording? Is it simply a flaw in the machine, or is the machine, for the first time, flawlessly capturing the ghost that has always been hiding in the noise? Your second night in the lab feels almost routine. The initial novelty has worn off, replaced by a quiet sense of familiarity. The long corridor of the Kellerman building doesn't feel ominous, just quiet. The process of being wired by Ben, the graduate student, is no longer a strange intrusion but a familiar ritual. You know the cool dab of the conductive gel, the gentle pressure of the electrodes, the soft mesh cap settling over your hair. You exchange a few pleasantries, casual conversation about classes, and the approaching weekend. Dr. Finch seems a little more frayed around the edges than he did last week, his eyes carrying an even deeper exhaustion. He gives you a tight, professional smile and explains that your baseline data was excellent, exactly what they were hoping for. He doesn't mention the persistent, low-frequency hum. It's still there, a faint, ghostly line on the spectrogram in the control room, an irritating, unsolved puzzle. You walk into the sleeping chamber, and the small, Spartan room feels less like a sterile box and more like a sanctuary. It is a space designed for nothing but rest. As you lie back on the bed, the crisp sheets cool against your skin, you feel a sense of calm, anticipation. You are ready for the deep, dreamless sleep you experienced here before. Ben gives you a final thumbs up from the doorway before swinging the heavy door shut. The world vanishes behind that soft, definitive thump. The profound silence descends again, but this time it's like an old friend. You close your eyes. You listen to the soft rhythm of your own heart, the gentle tide of your breath. You consciously relax every muscle, letting go of the day's tension, and allow yourself to drift away on the silent, black current of sleep. In the control room, the night begins much like the last. Ben sips a coffee, his eyes scanning the bank of monitors. Dr. Finch is at a separate desk, typing up notes, cross-referencing the infrasound anomaly with atmospheric pressure readings and seismic activity reports from the university's geology department. He is determined to find a rational source. He is a man wrestling with a stubborn data point. For the first few hours, everything is perfect. Your brainwaves cascade gracefully from alpha to theta, then into the slow rolling delta waves of deep sleep. Your heart rate is low and steady. Your breathing deep and regular. You are a model subject. It happens at 2:17 a.m. You are deep in the throes of REM sleep, your eyes darting back and forth behind your lids as your brain orchestrates some silent, internal drama. On the monitor, Ben notices a flicker in your physiological data, a slight, momentary arrhythmia in your heart rate. It's tiny, barely a blip. He leans forward, his focus sharpening. Then it happens again, more pronounced this time. Your heart rate jumps from a placid 58 beats per minute to 90, then 110. Your breathing becomes shallow, rapid. The EEG scribbles a frantic, chaotic pattern, a sudden, violent arousal of the sympathetic nervous system. It's a classic textbook example of pavor nocturnus, a night terror. In these episodes, a person can exhibit all the physical signs of extreme fear, screaming, flailing, a racing heart, all while remaining completely asleep, with no memory of the event upon waking. They are terrifying to witness, but are entirely internal events. "We've got a significant arousal event," Ben says, his voice calm, clinical. "Subject is experiencing a night terror." Dr. Finch is instantly at his side. "No external stimulus? No sound spike?" "Nothing," Ben confirms. "The room is dead, silent, just that." He points to the spectrogram. The 19 hertz hum is still there, steady as ever. But now there's something else. A new, faint signal on the audio feed. A whisper-thin line of distortion that seems to phase in and out of existence. It's too faint to be a voice, too erratic to be mechanical. At the same time, Finch looks at the infrared video feed. The image is grainy, rendered in shifting shades of gray and white that represent heat. You are a warm, bright shape in the center of the bed. But in the corner of the room, near the foot of your bed, there is a patch of cold. Not just an absence of heat, but an active, deep gray spot where the ambient temperature of the room seems to have plummeted. And as they watch, a shape seems to coalesce within it. It's not solid. It's like a heatless distortion, a vaguely human-shaped column of static that seems to absorb the warmth around it. Then it moves. It glides, silent and slow, from the corner of the room toward your bed. "What is that?" Ben whispers, his clinical composure completely gone, his voice tight with disbelief and burgeoning fear. "Is that a camera glitch? A lens flare?" But it's not a glitch. As the shape drifts closer to you, your physiological response becomes more violent. Your heart rate now thunders at 150 beats per minute. Your brainwaves are a jagged mess of pure terror. The instruments are screaming that you are in mortal danger, that you are experiencing a fear so profound it is pushing your body to its absolute limit. Yet you remain asleep, trapped and helpless. Dr. Finch stares at the screen, his scientific mind racing, trying to find a logical explanation. It's a reflection. It's a shadow. It's faulty wiring. It's infrasound-induced hallucination, not yours, but his. But the data from the EEG, the EKG, the audio feed, the thermal camera, they all corroborate the same impossible event. Something is in that room, and it is leaning over you. This is the moment the foundations of Dr. Finch's world crumble. His carefully constructed reality, built on data and evidence and peer-reviewed certainty, shatters into a million pieces. The protocol for a participant in medical distress is clear. You breach the room, you render aid. But the thing on the screen is not a medical emergency. It is a violation of known physics. It is an impossibility. And in a moment of pure, primal terror, Alistair Finch forgets protocol. He forgets science. He forgets everything except the terrifying image on the screen and the overwhelming, protective instinct to get you, the human being in his care, out of there. He lunges for the intercom panel, his hand trembling as he slams the talk button. His voice, when it comes out, is not the calm, gentle cadence of a researcher. It is a raw, ragged shard of panic. It rips through the absolute silence of your sealed room, tearing you from the deepest layers of sleep. Wake up! Who is that other person in the room with you? The words are a shock of ice water. You gasp, your eyes flying open. You are not in a dream. You are in the small, white, sterile room. The intercom speaker crackles with static. You are sitting bolt upright, your heart hammering against your ribs, the ghost of an unspeakable terror clinging to you. You whip your head around. The room is empty. The chair is empty. The corners are empty. You are utterly, completely alone. But the sheer, undiluted panic in Dr. Finch's voice still echoes in the silent air. It raises the ultimate, terrifying question for anyone who has ever felt a presence in the dark. Which is the greater horror, to be trapped in a nightmare, or to be told by a terrified observer on the outside that your nightmare is real? The world comes crashing in. One moment, you are suspended in the black, silent velvet of deep sleep. The next, you are violently awake, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. The panicked voice from the intercom is still echoing in the small room, a raw, jagged edge of terror that slices through the clinical silence. Who is that other person in the room with you? Your reaction is instantaneous, a primal surge of adrenaline that bypasses thought. You scramble backward on the bed, pressing yourself against the hard, unforgiving wall, your eyes wide and scanning every shadow, every corner. The room is exactly as you remember it. Small, Spartan, empty. The single chair sits vacant. The high-mounted camera stares down like a glassy, impassive eye. There is nowhere for anyone to hide. You are alone. But the terror in that voice was real, undeniable. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a desperate plea for an explanation that the speaker clearly did not have. The intercom crackles again, but this time it's just static, a hiss that seems to amplify the ringing in your ears. Seconds stretch into an eternity. You're trapped, wired to the wall, your mind reeling. Was it a prank? A bizarre part of the experiment designed to test your reaction to stress? It seems impossibly cruel, unethical. The door, the heavy, soundproof door you had come to see as a shield, now feels like the seal on a tomb. You stare at it, willing it to open, your breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Suddenly, you hear a frantic fumbling from the other side, the distinct sound of a keycard being swiped, rejected, then swiped again with furious repetition, a muffled curse. Then, the lock disengages with a loud, mechanical clunk that makes you jump. The door is thrown open, not gently, but with a force that makes it slam against the corridor wall. Dr. Finch stands in the doorway, his face ashen, his professional composure utterly gone. He looks not at you, but past you, his eyes darting around the empty room with a wild, haunted expression. Ben, the graduate student, is just behind him, his own face pale and slack with shock. "Are you all right?" Finch asks, his voice strained, a hollow version of its former calm. What's going on, you demand, your voice trembling. What was that? Who did you see? Stay there, Finch commands, holding up a hand as he takes a hesitant step into the room, his gaze sweeping every inch of the space. He looks under the bed. He checks behind the small table. He is a man searching for a rational explanation that he knows, deep down, he will not find. Ben remains frozen in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the spot at the foot of your bed where the impossible shape had been just moments before. He seems afraid to even cross the threshold. The contrast between their current state and their earlier professionalism is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. These were men of science, of calm observation and controlled variables. To see them so undone confirms that what they witnessed was no simple anomaly. This immediate aftermath of a paranormal event is often a chaotic, disorienting experience. Documented accounts from similar situations, like the famous Enfield poltergeist case, describe investigators arriving moments after a violent manifestation to find a scene of disarray but no discernible cause. Furniture would be overturned, objects thrown across the room, yet the family would be huddled together, and all doors and windows would be locked from the inside. The impossibility is the core of the terror. It's not just that something happened, but that it happened in a way that defies every known law of physics and logic. Dr. Finch straightens up, his search complete. He runs a shaky hand through his already disheveled hair. The room is clear, he states, the words sounding absurd even to him. He finally looks at you, truly looks at you, and seems to see the tangle of wires connecting you to the wall. Ben, get the sensors off. Now. There's an urgency in his voice that brooks no argument. Ben springs into action, his hands fumbling as he disconnects the main plug. The sudden liberation feels like being cut free from a spider's web. You scramble off the bed, pulling the mesh cap from your head, not caring about the electrodes that come with it. I'm calling security, Finch says, pulling out his phone. We need to secure this wing. We need a full sweep. He is reverting to protocol, to procedure, a drowning man grasping for the wreckage of his shattered worldview. Within minutes, 2 university security officers arrive. They are solid, pragmatic men, used to dealing with rowdy students and petty theft, not panicked scientists and invisible intruders. They listen with skeptical patience as Dr. Finch, his voice still shaky, explains that he had a clear visual of an unauthorized individual in a sealed, locked room. They conduct their search with professional thoroughness, checking the ceiling panels, the ventilation grates, the integrity of the door lock. Their conclusion is swift and absolute. There is no sign of forced entry. The lock is a high-grade magnetic system, logged and monitored. It had not been opened since you were sealed inside. The ventilation grates are bolted shut. The room is, for all intents and purposes, a hermetically sealed box. There was no intrusion, because an intrusion was impossible. One of the officers, an older man with a weary face, gives Finch a look that is part pity, part suspicion. Dr. Finch, he says slowly, are you sure you didn't just see something? A shadow? A reflection on the monitor? He's offering a way out, a rational explanation for an irrational event. He's suggesting that the fault lies not in reality, but in perception. It's a common human reaction to the inexplicable to question the witness before questioning the world. We are more comfortable believing a person is mistaken, or lying, or even insane, than we are accepting that the fundamental rules of our existence have been broken. But Finch is resolute, his scientific integrity now a paradoxical source of conviction in the unbelievable. I know what I saw, he insists, his voice low and intense. We both saw it. It was on the thermal camera. He gestures toward the control room. The data is all there. The officers exchange another look. This is beyond their pay grade. They file their report. Dr. Finch reported a visual disturbance. Premises searched. No signs of entry or tampering. Room secure. They leave, and you are left in the hallway with a terrified scientist and his equally shaken assistant. The sterile, academic environment of the university now feels fragile, a thin veneer over something dark and ancient. And it leaves you with a chilling, unanswerable question. If a person can be in a locked room, and a presence can enter that same room without ever opening the door, which of you is the ghost? The sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor feels colder than it did before. The security guards are gone, their pragmatic presence having offered no comfort, only a stark confirmation of the impossible. You are left standing in the echoing quiet with Dr. Finch and Ben. The adrenaline from your panicked awakening is beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, trembling unease. You look from Finch's haggard face to Ben's wide, stunned eyes. These were your anchors to logic, your assurance that this was all just science. Now they are adrift, and they've pulled you into the abyss with them. The footage, Finch says, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. It's not a suggestion, it's a compulsion. He turns and strides back into the control room, a man drawn by a horrific gravity to the epicenter of his own shattered reality. Ben hesitates, his feet seeming to root themselves to the floor. He looks at you, his expression a silent plea for this to be over. But you follow Finch. You have to know. You have to see what he saw. The control room is a stark contrast of calm and chaos. The machines hum with their steady, indifferent energy, but the atmosphere is thick with a palpable tension. Finch doesn't sit. He stands before the main monitor, his hands gripping the back of his chair so tightly his knuckles are white. He gestures for Ben to come to the keyboard. Bring up the recording from 216 to 218, he commands. Sync the thermal, the high-def video, and the audio feed. Ben's hands hover over the keyboard for a moment, trembling slightly, before he complies. He isolates the 2-minute segment, a tiny sliver of the night's vast data stream. He brings 3 windows up on the screen, side by side. On the left is the standard high-definition video feed. In the center, the thermal imaging. On the right, the audio waveform. He presses play. For the first few seconds, everything is normal. The HD video shows you sleeping peacefully in the bed, a still life in black and white. The thermal camera shows your body as a bright, warm shape against the cooler gray of the sheets and the room. The audio waveform is nearly flat, showing only the faint, persistent line of that sub-audible 19 Hz hum. Then, at 2 hours 17 minutes and 3 seconds, it begins. In the standard video feed, absolutely nothing changes. The room remains empty, still, and silent. But on the other 2 screens, reality fractures. The thermal camera registers the first change, a sudden, localized drop in temperature in the far corner of the room. A patch of the ambient gray deepens to a dark charcoal black. It's not just the absence of a heat source. It is an active void, a spot of impossible cold. As you watch, transfixed, this cold spot begins to coalesce. It gathers itself from the edges inward, forming a vague, shifting column about the height of a person. It is not solid. It has no discernible features. It looks like television static, a shimmering, heat-sucking distortion that is roughly, terrifyingly, human-shaped. There, Finch breathes, his voice tight. Freeze it. Enhance. Ben stops the video. He zooms in on the thermal image. The shape is a roiling mass of cold, a vortex of nothingness that seems to twist and writhe. It has no clear outline, yet its form is unmistakable. It is a presence defined by its absolute lack of the very energy that defines life. It is heatless. Your own physiological data, displayed in a small window at the bottom of the screen, tells the rest of the story. The moment the shape appears, your heart rate begins to climb. As it detaches from the corner of the room and begins to glide silently toward the bed, your brainwaves erupt into a pattern of pure terror. You watch, your stomach twisting, as the heatless distortion drifts over to your sleeping form. It pauses at the foot of the bed, seeming to observe you. Then, it leans forward, its indistinct upper portion moving directly over your chest. On the screen, at that exact moment, your body arches almost imperceptibly, and your monitored heart rate skyrockets to a dangerous, unsustainable rhythm. You are physically reacting to a presence that is, on the standard video feed, not there at all. This is the central, terrifying mystery of so much paranormal documentation. It's reminiscent of the work of early pioneers in instrumental transcommunication, or ITC. Researchers like Friedrich Jürgensen in the 1952nd, who was attempting to record bird songs, was shocked to discover faint, disembodied voices on his tapes when he played them back. He and others who followed theorized that unseen entities couldn't create energy on their own, but could manipulate existing ambient energy, radio static, white noise, even stray electrons in a camera's sensor to make themselves seen or heard. They were, in essence, borrowing from the background noise of our world to create a shape in the static. Ben, his voice barely a whisper, points to the audio waveform. "Dr. Finch, look." The faint, distorted signal that had appeared during the event is now isolated. It aligns perfectly with the movement of the thermal anomaly. It's not a voice, it's not even a word. It is a low, guttural rasp, a sound that seems to bubble up from the very edge of perception. It is a sound of immense pressure and ancient malice. Finch stares at the screen, his face a mask of horrified fascination. He makes Ben play the clip again. And again. He zooms in on the standard video feed, searching desperately for a reflection, a shadow from the hallway lights, a wisp of dust, a digital artifact, anything to explain away the horror on the thermal feed. He finds nothing. He is a scientist, and his instruments have just provided him with clear, unequivocal, and utterly impossible data. The machine did not fail. It worked perfectly. It captured every metric with flawless precision. And in doing so, it revealed a truth that science has no framework to contain. As Dr. Finch replays the footage for the 5th time, watching the heatless shape lean over your sleeping body, a profound question hangs in the silent, humming room. When we build machines to eliminate all human error and subjective perception, to give us nothing but the cold, hard facts, what do we do when those machines show us a ghost? Do we declare the data corrupt? Or do we face the terrifying possibility that our reality is the thing that has been corrupted all along? The days that follow the event are a blur of muted anxiety and sleepless nights, ironically plagued by the very thing you were trying to cure. The university, in its vast, bureaucratic impersonality, has gone silent. You receive a brief, formal email stating that the sleep study has been temporarily suspended due to equipment calibration issues. You are paid the full amount for your participation, a sum that now feels less like compensation and more like hush money. The sterile language of the email is a clear message. Do not ask questions. This is being handled. Or, more accurately, this is being buried. You try to return to your normal routine. You go to classes, you study in the library, you meet friends for coffee. But a subtle film of unease now covers everything. You find yourself watching shadows, flinching at unexpected noises. The familiar comfort of your own bedroom has been compromised. Every night, as you lie in the dark, you can't shake the memory of the thermal image, the heatless, man-shaped void. You lie there, hyper-aware of the temperature in the room, of the quality of the silence. You've never been afraid of the dark, but now you find yourself fighting sleep, because sleep is no longer a refuge. It is the place where you are most vulnerable. About a week after the incident, you receive a call from an unknown number. You almost ignore it, but something compels you to answer. The voice on the other end is instantly recognizable, yet utterly changed. It's Dr. Finch. He sounds ragged, his voice strained and stripped of all its former professional calm. He asks to meet you, not on campus, but at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop downtown. He sounds desperate. When you see him, you're shocked by his appearance. He looks like he hasn't slept in a week. His eyes are bloodshot and haunted, and he has a tremor in his hand as he lifts his coffee cup. He doesn't bother with pleasantries. "They're shutting it down," he says, his voice low and conspiratorial. "The department head, the University Ethics Committee. They're classifying the data from that night as corrupted and inconclusive. They're ordering me to take a sabbatical." He leans forward, his eyes boring into yours. It wasn't corrupted, and you know it. Every sensor was functioning within its designated parameters. The data is clean, and it's terrifying. "But that's not what I called you about." He takes a shaky breath. This this isn't the first time something strange has happened in that lab. He proceeds to tell you a story that makes the hair on your arms stand up. The Kellerman building is new, but the psychology department it houses is not. For 50 years prior, it was located in the Old North Hall, a Gothic, ivy-covered building on the other side of campus. The sleep lab there was much more primitive, but it was there that Dr. Finch, as a young researcher under the mentorship of the department's previous chairman, had first encountered what he called persistent environmental anomalies. He talks about a specific incident in the late 1992. A participant, a law student, had reported a recurring intensely vivid nightmare over several nights. In the dream, he was a child again, trapped in an old-fashioned hospital ward, and a tall, shadowy doctor was standing over his bed, holding him down, not with his hands, but with an immense, suffocating pressure. The student reported waking up with chest pains and a profound sense of dread. The researchers at the time, Finch included, had dismissed it as a simple anxiety dream, a manifestation of the stress of law school. This kind of thematic recurrence in nightmares is a well-documented psychological phenomenon, where the subconscious fixates on a specific fear and replays it. They noted it down as a thematic anxiety-induced somnial loop. But the student's description was unnervingly specific. He described the creak of the floorboards, the smell of antiseptic, and the distinct feeling of cold radiating from the figure beside him. One night, the lab's audio equipment, which was far less sensitive than the modern digital gear, picked up a strange series of clicks and a low, guttural moan at the exact moment the student's heart rate spiked in his sleep. The official report logged it as environmental interference, likely from the building's ancient heating system. But Finch never forgot it. He had archived the data, an odd little puzzle he could never quite solve. Now, he sees it in a new, horrifying light. The pressure on the chest, the feeling of cold, the guttural sound, the parallels to what your own physiological data showed were undeniable. The entity, he was calling it an entity now. The word anomaly, no longer sufficient, had been there all along. It wasn't just in the new lab. It seemed to be attached to the sleep study itself, to the act of observation. The burden of this knowledge has clearly broken him. To have spent a lifetime dedicated to the rational, the measurable, and the explainable, only to be confronted with something that spits in the face of all of it. He is a man caught between two impossible worlds. The university, his life's work, is demanding he deny his own data, his own senses, to protect its reputation. But his scientific integrity, the very core of his being, demands that he acknowledge the truth, no matter how monstrous. This psychological toll on paranormal investigators is a recurring, tragic theme. Many, like the famed demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, were ostracized by mainstream academia, their careers and reputations suffering because they refused to dismiss what they had witnessed. They were forced to exist in a gray area between science and what many considered superstition. Dr. Finch looks down at his trembling hands, then back at you. "They're trying to hide it," he says, his voice filled with a mix of fear and a newfound righteous anger. "But you can't hide something like this. It doesn't want to be hidden." The statement hangs in the air, a chilling personification of the formless void from the monitor. It suggests not just a presence, but an intelligence, a motive. And it leaves you with a deeply unsettling question. If a haunting can attach itself not just to a place, but to an idea, to the very act of studying sleep, then what happens when the study ends? Does the ghost simply vanish, or does it follow the last person it was watching? Dr. Finch's confession hangs in the air long after you've left the coffee shop, a chilling addendum to your own terrifying experience. The idea that this wasn't an isolated event, but part of a larger, older pattern, deepens the mystery from a singular horror into a chronic, lurking malignancy. It's no longer just about what happened to you in that room, it's about the room itself and the ground on which it was built. Your fear, which had been a sharp, personal thing, now feels connected to a history you can't see. Finch's words about the entity being tied to the department itself, to the study of sleep, had sent him down a rabbit hole of historical archives, and his quiet obsession was now becoming your own. He had mentioned, almost as an aside, that the modern Kellerman building was new, but the land it occupied was not empty before. He had started digging, and he urged you to do the same, to look for yourself. It's a strange, almost universal human impulse when confronted with the paranormal. We seek validation in history, as if finding a story of past tragedy will somehow anchor the floating, untethered horror of the present. And so, you find yourself in the university's digital archives, typing keywords into a search bar: Kellerman Building, North Campus, land history, university construction. The results are mostly boring: architectural blueprints, soil sample reports, budget proposals. But then you find it: a digitized map from 1890. The university, in its infancy, was much smaller. The current location of the gleaming, modern Kellerman building was, back then, the site of the St. Jude's Infirmary for the Indigent. It was a place funded by the university's founding patrons, a charitable institution meant to serve the city's poorest and sickest residents. Further searches bring up grainy, sepia-toned photographs. It was a grim, imposing brick building with narrow windows that looked more like a prison's than a hospital's. You keep digging, falling deeper into the history of the place. St. Jude's was operational from 1888 until it was crippled by the great influenza pandemic of 1918. The sheer volume of death in those years was staggering. The infirmary, designed to hold 50 patients, was at times crammed with over 200, with bodies lining the hallways. But it wasn't just the pandemic that gave the place its dark reputation. You find a series of scanned newspaper articles from a local gazette in the 1892nd, detailing accusations against one of the infirmary's senior physicians, a Dr. Silas Croft. The articles are written in the florid, dramatic prose of the era. They speak of whispers and rumors among the city's poor about Dr. Beatine. Croft's unorthodox methods. He was apparently obsessed with respiratory ailments, particularly tuberculosis and pneumonia. This obsession wasn't driven by a desire to heal, but by a chillingly detached scientific curiosity. There are veiled accounts of patients in the final, agonizing stages of their illness being subjected to experimental treatments without their consent. One particularly harrowing anecdote, recounted by a former nurse who quit in protest, describes Dr. Croft's practice of sitting by the bedsides of dying patients, not to offer comfort, but to observe them with a cold, clinical intensity. She claimed he would sometimes place a hand on their chest, not to check their vitals, but to, in his own words, feel the struggle of the vital spirit as it departs the flesh. He was, she said, a collector of last breaths. The accusations never amounted to a formal inquiry. In an era before stringent medical ethics, and with victims who had no social standing, the rumors were dismissed by the university board as the grumblings of the ungrateful poor. Dr. Croft continued his work until he himself succumbed to a sudden, violent illness in 1899. He died, according to the infirmary's records, in his own office, which was located in the west wing of the building, the wing that primarily housed the terminal respiratory patients. You pull up the architectural overlays from the Kellerman building's construction proposal. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine as you align the modern blueprints with the old map of the infirmary. The location of the sleep lab, room 217, the sealed, soundproofed chamber where you lay, is built almost directly over the foundations of what was once the west wing of St. Jude's. It sits squarely on the spot where Dr. Silas Croft had his office, and where he conducted his ghoulish bedside vigils. Suddenly, the details of your experience, and the details from Finch's story about the student in the 92nd, snap into a terrifyingly coherent picture. The pressure on the chest, the intense, radiating cold that was a hallmark of Croft's reported presence, the guttural whisper on the audio feed, the sound of a final, agonized breath, the heatless shape on the thermal camera, leaning over you with a detached, observational stillness. It wasn't just a random haunting. It was a pattern, a routine, a doctor still making his rounds. This discovery of a specific, named historical entity is a common turning point in paranormal investigations. It transforms the phenomenon from a vague, shapeless fear into something with a history, a name, and a possible motive. It is the moment in the classic Amityville case when the investigators learned of the DeFeo murders, giving the demonic activity a potential origin story. It grounds the terror in human evil, which is, in some ways, more comprehensible than a purely elemental or inhuman force. You lean back from your computer. The screens glow, illuminating a room that suddenly feels much darker. The knowledge is a heavy weight. The entity in the lab is not a ghost of the building, but a ghost of the ground itself. A psychic stain left by a man whose malevolent curiosity was so strong it apparently transcended death itself. It raises a truly chilling question about the nature of such hauntings. Is a ghost merely an echo, a mindless recording of a past trauma doomed to replay itself for eternity? Or is it something more? Is it a consciousness, trapped and resentful, still seeking the same grim satisfaction it sought in life, forever drawn to those who are vulnerable, sleeping, and just a breath away from the veil? The historical context of St. Jude's infirmary and the malevolent figure of Dr. Silas Croft doesn't banish the fear. It gives it a face. The formless, heatless shape on the monitor now has a name, and the pressure on your chest now has a motive. It's the chilling, clinical curiosity of a man who never stopped his rounds. This knowledge becomes a shared, obsessive burden between you and Dr. Finch. He calls you every other day, his voice a ragged whisper over the phone, detailing his own frantic research. He's been practically living in the university's physical archives, the dusty basement where old, forgotten records are stored. He's looking for something more, a piece of the puzzle that will make it all make sense. And then he finds it. He calls you, his voice electric, with a horrified discovery. "I found another one," he says, his breathing shallow. "Another participant. From 4 years ago." He didn't finish the study. He quit after the second night. Finch tells you the student's name is Marcus Thorne, and he's no longer at the university. He dropped out entirely a semester after his experience in the lab, a detail that sends a chill down your spine. Finch found the old file buried in a mislabeled archive box. The official reason for Thorne's withdrawal was cited as personal reasons, but attached to the form, folded and tucked away, was a handwritten note from the student himself, a desperate, rambling letter to the then head of the study, Finch's predecessor, that was clearly ignored. Finch has a copy. He reads it to you over the phone, and the words paint a picture of terror that is achingly familiar. Marcus Thorne wrote that on his second night in the lab, he had experienced the most vivid and horrifying nightmare of his life. He dreamed he was paralyzed, unable to move or scream, while a tall, shadowy figure stood over him. He described an unbearable weight on his chest, a feeling of being crushed by an immense cold. He wrote that the figure seemed to be watching him, not with anger, but with a terrifying, detached interest. The dream was so visceral that he woke up screaming, ripping the sensors off his own head. But here is the detail that makes Finch's voice tremble. Marcus wrote that as he was being overwhelmed by the suffocating pressure in his dream, he heard a voice. Not a clear voice, but a whisper right beside his ear. It said one word, a name, Eliza. He woke up with that name echoing in his head. The research assistants on duty that night had dismissed the entire event as a severe case of sleep paralysis, with an associated hypnagogic hallucination, a common phenomenon where the waking mind consciously experiences the dreamlike state of REM sleep, often resulting in terrifying visions and a sense of being held down. It's the brain's way of keeping the body from acting out its dreams. Finch, with this new piece of information, dove back into the records of St. Jude's infirmary. He cross-referenced the name Eliza with the patient admissions from the 1892nd, the period of Dr. Croft's tenure. He found her, Eliza Barrow, a 19-year-old seamstress admitted in the winter of 1896 with an advanced case of tuberculosis. Her medical chart penned in Dr. Croft's own meticulous spidery handwriting, is a chilling document. He details her rapid decline with an almost poetic detachment. The final entry notes the date and time of her death, but it includes a disturbing unprofessional addendum. Croft wrote, "Patient exhibited remarkable tenacity. The spirit fought with unusual vigor before its departure. A most fascinating case study." The connection is electrifying. A spark across a century of darkness. The entity, the echo of Dr. Croft, isn't just mindlessly replaying his own actions. He is reenacting a specific, favored memory. He is searching for Eliza. Or perhaps, in his spectral, malevolent state, he is mistaking others for her. It adds a layer of profound tragedy to the horror. This isn't just a haunting. It's a story of obsession, of a predator forever seeking his most memorable prey. This element of a ghost searching for a lost loved one, or a lost victim, is a powerful and recurring trope in folklore from around the world. Think of the countless tales of the La Llorona, the weeping woman of Hispanic legend, who drowned her children and is now cursed to search for them for eternity, wailing by the water's edge. These stories tap into a deep-seated human fear of eternal, unresolved grief and fixation. They suggest that a powerful enough emotional imprint, love, rage, or in Croft's case, a perverse obsession can anchor a spirit to the world. Finch manages to track down a current address for Marcus Thorne. He lives 2 states away, in a small, rural town. Finch believes he has to talk to him, to warn him, to understand what lasting impact the experience had. He asks you to come with him. He sounds like a man who is terrified of facing this alone. You hesitate. Part of you wants to walk away, to take the university's hush money, and try to forget any of this ever happened. But another part of you knows you can't. You are tied to this now. You shared the same space, felt the same pressure, were watched by the same cold, heatless eyes. You are now part of the history of that room. You agree to go. The decision feels both foolish and necessary. You are willingly walking deeper into the haunting, not away from it. It raises a question about the human response to trauma. Why do some people flee from a terrifying experience, while others feel an irresistible compulsion to confront it, to understand it, even at the risk of their own sanity? Is it a desire for control, to put a name and a story to the faceless chaos? Or is it something simpler? Is it the quiet, dawning realization that you can't run from a ghost that might not be tied to a place, but is now tied to you? The drive to see Marcus Thorne is a long, strange, and silent affair. You and Dr. Finch move through the monotonous landscape of highways and anonymous small towns, enclosed in the humming bubble of his car. For the first hour, neither of you speaks. You watch the asphalt unfurl, a gray ribbon leading you deeper into someone else's trauma, which so closely mirrors your own. Finch grips the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity, his eyes fixed on the road, but you can tell his mind is somewhere else entirely. It's in a locked room, staring at a thermal monitor, trying to reconcile the irreconcilable. When he finally speaks, his voice is quiet, almost academic, as if he's delivering a lecture to an empty hall. "It could all be sleep paralysis," he says, the words sounding rehearsed, brittle. "Everything. Your experience. Marcus Thorne's experience. It fits the clinical profile almost perfectly." You turn to look at him. He doesn't meet your gaze. He's talking to the windshield, to himself. He's a man of science attempting to rebuild his faith from the ground up, starting with the first brick of rational explanation. "Sleep paralysis," he continues, his cadence becoming more steady as he retreats into the familiar territory of his profession, "is a state of atonia. During REM sleep, the brain releases neurotransmitters that effectively paralyze the body. It's a safety mechanism. It stops you from physically acting out your dreams. But occasionally, the mind wakes up before the body does. You are conscious, aware of your surroundings, but you cannot move a muscle. You can't even speak." He describes the phenomenon with a detached precision. This is the documented, scientific truth. Millions of people have experienced it. It has been recorded and studied for centuries. interpreted through the lens of culture and superstition. In Newfoundland, it's known as the Old Hag, a malevolent witch who sits on your chest to steal your breath. In Japanese culture, it's kanashibari, being bound by metal. In Mexico, the terrifying phrase is se me subió el muerto, the dead climbed on top of me. The experience is universal. Only the name for the demon changes. The mind, in that state, Finch goes on, is incredibly suggestible. It's caught between the dream world and reality. It's the perfect breeding ground for hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. The brain tries to explain the paralysis, the crushing weight on the chest, which is just the mind's interpretation of the diaphragm struggling against the atonia, and so it conjures an intruder, a figure in the room, a demon, an alien, a ghost. It feels completely, utterly real, but it's an internal projection, a waking nightmare. He falls silent for a moment, letting the weight of the explanation settle in the car. He is offering you a way out, a logical, documented, scientifically validated escape hatch from the horror. He's telling you that the pressure, the presence, the fear, it was all in your head, a trick of brain chemistry, a misfire in the complex wiring of sleep. He even recounts a story from early in his career, a patient who was convinced her house was haunted. She reported a shadowy figure in her bedroom every night, whispering her name. It turned out she had been prescribed a new beta blocker for hypertension, a medication whose known, though rare, side effects include intensely vivid nightmares and sleep paralysis. The haunting stopped the day she switched her prescription. He tells the story with a kind of desperate hope, as if proving it was real once will make it real again now. But it feels hollow, insufficient. What about the thermal camera? You ask, your voice quiet. What about the cold spot? What about the shape that wasn't there on the other video feed? Finch's knuckles tighten on the steering wheel. Equipment malfunction, he says, the words coming out too quickly. A condensation smudge on the inside of the lens, magnified by the infrared sensor. A localized dip in the ventilation system's output, causing a cold pocket of air to form. There are a dozen possible mechanical explanations. And the audio, you press, the voice Marcus Thorne heard, the sound on our recording? Auditory hallucinations are the most common component of the experience, he retorts, his voice gaining a sharp, defensive edge. The brain creates what it expects to hear. It's all part of the same neurological cascade. He has an answer for everything, a neat clinical box for every terrifying detail. But you saw his face in the control room. You heard the raw, undiluted panic in his voice over the intercom. He is not describing what he believes. He is reciting from a textbook, clinging to it like a sacred text in a world that has suddenly become profane. His desperation is the most human psychological reaction you can imagine. The desperate attempt to rationalize away a trauma that threatens to shatter one's entire understanding of reality. As the miles roll by, his carefully constructed argument begins to fray at the edges. He knows it cannot account for everything. It can't account for the historical corroboration of Dr. Silas Croft. It can't explain why the malfunction on the thermal camera perfectly matched your physiological terror. And it certainly can't explain how you both heard his voice through the intercom, a panicked external confirmation that something was in the room. The car grows quiet again as you pull off the highway, following the signs to the small, forgotten town where Marcus Thorne now lives. Finch's shoulders are slumped. His attempt to retreat into the safety of science has failed. The facts of the case stubbornly refuse to fit into the clean box of sleep paralysis. He finally looks at you, his eyes filled with a terrifying new thought. But what if, he begins, his voice barely a whisper, what if we're looking at it backwards? The question hangs in the air, more chilling than any ghost story. What if sleep paralysis isn't the explanation? What if it's the mechanism? What if that state of helplessness, of being trapped between worlds, is the doorway? What if you have to be conscious, but unable to move, for something like Dr. Croft to be able to reach across and touch you? Dr. Finch's question, the terrifying reframing of sleep paralysis as a doorway rather than a delusion, hovers in the car like a toxic gas. It changes everything. It suggests that you weren't hallucinating a presence. You were made vulnerable to a real one. The rest of the drive is cloaked in a heavy silence. The meeting with Marcus Thorne itself is a somber, anticlimactic affair. He is a man hollowed out by his experience, living a quiet, cautious life. He confirms every detail Finch found in his letter, his eyes distant as if replaying a nightmare he can never truly wake from. But he offers no new information, no key to unlock the mystery. He is simply another victim, another data point in a terrifying study. The drive back is even quieter. The trip has yielded no answers, only confirmation of the horror's reach. In the days that follow, Finch retreats. He stops calling. You are left alone with the echoes of the event, the chilling history of Dr. Croft, and the haunted face of Marcus Thorne. You begin to think, maybe it's over, that Finch has finally accepted the university's gag order and moved on. You are wrong. He wasn't moving on. He was doubling down. He was a scientist, and when faced with an impossible problem, his only recourse was to dissect the data until it confessed. He couldn't get back into the sealed lab, but he had copies of everything from that night on encrypted hard drives. He barricaded himself in his home office and went to work. His obsession now focused on one specific piece of evidence: the audio file. He became fixated on the faint, whisper-thin line of distortion that had appeared on the spectrogram, the sound that had coincided with the thermal anomalies appearance and your own physiological terror. It was the one piece of data that, unlike a visual shadow or a cold spot, felt like it could be captured, isolated, and analyzed to its core components. He began to treat it like a practitioner of instrumental transcommunication, using the tools of a sound engineer to hunt for a ghost. This process is well documented in the world of paranormal research, known as searching for electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Investigators will spend hundreds of hours filtering, amplifying, and dissecting recordings of static, believing that spirits can manipulate the random noise to form words. Finch, the man of science, was now, in essence, doing the exact same thing. He started by applying a high-pass filter, digitally scrubbing away the persistent 19 Hz infrasound hum that had contaminated the recording from the start. With the low-frequency drone gone, the subtler sounds emerged. He could hear the rustle of your sheets, the almost inaudible sigh of your own breathing. Then, he began to work on the segment of the recording from 2:17 a.m. He isolated the strange, raspy distortion and amplified it, looping the half-second of audio over and over again. At first, it was just noise, a garbled burst of static. But as he applied more sophisticated noise reduction algorithms, a process that would feel right at home in a forensic audio lab, something began to take shape. It was a voice, faint, guttural, and layered with a strange, wet resonance, like a word spoken through water. It was not the name Eliza that Marcus Thorne had heard. It was something else. A single, rasping sound, a word of immense antiquity and malice. Finch listened to it 100 times, his blood running cold. It was a sound that felt profoundly, fundamentally wrong. This is a common report from those who claim to have captured Class A EVPs, the rarest and clearest type. They often describe the voices as having an unnatural cadence, a bizarre accent, or a syntax that is just slightly off, as if spoken by something that understands language but does not possess the natural apparatus for human speech. It's the uncanny valley of sound. But Finch was a scientist. Feeling wasn't data. He needed proof. He had hours of baseline audio view from the first night, including the initial calibration, where he asked you to speak a series of words and phrases. He fed this baseline recording of your voice into a phonetic analysis program, creating a detailed vocal print. It mapped the unique frequencies of your vocal cords, the specific formant peaks created by the shape of your mouth and sinuses, the subtle sibilance of your speech. It was your vocal fingerprint, as unique as your actual one. Then, he fed the isolated, guttural whisper from the second night into the same program. The computer processed the sound, breaking it down into its fundamental acoustic components. The result that came back on the screen was the final nail in the coffin of his skepticism. The report was unequivocal. The sound's fundamental frequency was far too low to have been produced by your vocal cords. More than that, the formant structure, the resonant frequencies that allow us to distinguish one vowel sound from another, did not match any known human phonetic. It contained harmonics that were physically impossible for a human larynx and vocal tract to generate. The program concluded, with a certainty of 99.8%, that the speaker was not you. Finch stared at the screen, at the stark, computer-generated graphs that proved an impossibility. He had it, the smoking gun. An audio recording of a voice from a sealed room, speaking a phonetically inhuman sound, captured while the room's only human occupant was asleep. It was the perfect piece of evidence, objective, measurable, and repeatable. He had used the very tools of scientific rationalism to prove the existence of something that defied all rationality. But his triumph was cold, terrifying. It answered one question only to ask a dozen more horrifying ones. What are the physics of a spectral voice? Does it require lungs? Does it manipulate the air molecules in the room? Or does it directly imprint itself onto the sensitive diaphragm of the microphone, an electronic ghost in the machine? If a thing without a body can produce a voice, then it is not merely an echo. It is an agent. It is a power. And it can speak. The phonetic analysis changed Dr. Finch. The man who had desperately tried to cling to the wreckage of scientific rationalism was now a man wholly possessed by the mystery. His initial fear had morphed into a dangerous, obsessive need to understand. He was no longer just a researcher, he was a hunter, and he was beginning to see connections everywhere. The evidence of the phonetically inhuman voice, a voice not your own, was the cornerstone. From there, he began to reconstruct the entity's behavior, not as a series of random paranormal events, but as a consistent, repeatable pattern of actions, a ghostly modus operandi. He called you again, his voice lower, more intense than ever before. He wasn't scared anymore. He was focused. "It's the observation," he said, his voice a low murmur over the phone. "It's always been about the observation." Croft wasn't just a sadist. He was a scientist, however perverse. He wasn't just feeling his patients' chests. He was taking data. He was noting their final, struggling breaths, their vital spirit. And what are we doing in a sleep study? We are doing the exact same thing. We are observing subjects in their most vulnerable state, monitoring their breath, their heart, the very electricity of their brains. We've unknowingly replicated the exact conditions of his original obsession. He laid it out for you, piece by chilling piece. He had gone back through the archives, not just of the infirmary, but of the psychology department's entire history. He found notes from the old lab in North Hall, the one he'd worked in as a young man. He found other instances of equipment malfunction and anxiety-induced nightmares that, when viewed through this new, terrifying lens, looked like more visits from the good doctor. There was a case in the 1982nd where a participant complained of a dream of smelling a strong antiseptic odor like carbolic acid, which was the standard disinfectant used in the Victorian era. Another participant in the early 2002nd woke up with unexplained, faint bruising on their ribs, dismissed at the time as having been caused by a wrinkled sheet or pressure from an electrode. Each detail, on its own, was nothing. A weird dream, a faulty sensor, a strange smell. But together, they formed a mosaic of a single, consistent presence, acting out the same grim playbook over decades. The entity's behavior was a direct, haunting mimicry of the recorded actions of Dr. Silas Croft. The focus on the chest and breath, the intense, cold presence, the clinical detachment, the guttural whisper, like a final, agonized gasp, the very thing Croft was obsessed with collecting. This theory, that a spirit can be bound to repeat its most intense or traumatic life actions, is a cornerstone of paranormal lore. It's the spectral soldier still patrolling his post a century after the war has ended, or the ghostly lady of the manor still searching the halls for her lost child. These Residual hauntings, as paranormal investigators call them, are thought to be like a recording imprinted on the environment, playing over and over again. But Finch's theory was more terrifying. The data didn't suggest a mindless recording. The interaction with Marcus Thorne, the whisper of Eliza's name, the way the presence seemed to react to the monitoring equipment itself, it suggested an intelligent, adaptive consciousness. This wasn't a recording of Dr. Croft. It was Dr. Croft, drawn to the modern equivalent of his old laboratory, attracted by the familiar scent of scientific observation of the vulnerable. Finch then told you about a local legend he'd unearthed, a story that had never been written down in any official university history, but that had persisted for generations among the campus maintenance staff and groundskeepers, the people who walked the halls late at night. The legend was about North Hall, the former home of the psychology department. They called one of the basement storage rooms the doctor's office. The story went that if you had to go down there late at night, you should always whistle or make some noise as you approached the door. The quiet ones, the ones who tried to slip in and out unnoticed, were the ones who felt it. A sudden, bone-deep chill, the feeling of being watched, and sometimes a faint pressure on their back, as if a cold hand were resting on their shoulder. They were being observed by the doctor. The anecdote was a piece of folklore, easily dismissible as superstition, but it was the detail about the quiet ones that struck Finch. The ones being watched were the ones who were trying not to be noticed. It was a perfect parallel to a sleeping subject in a study silent, still, and unaware of the observation. Croft, it seemed, was drawn to the unwary. This connection between the new lab and the old one, between your experience and the decades of forgotten glitches, solidified the terrifying truth. The problem wasn't the Kellerman building. The problem wasn't the ground it was built on. The problem was the experiment itself. Dr. Croft's spirit wasn't tied to a place. It was tied to a process. The university could build a new lab on the moon, and as long as they were observing sleeping subjects with clinical detachment, the good doctor might just show up to watch alongside them. This realization left Finch, and you, with a devastating open question. If a ghost can be this specific, this intelligent, and this bound to a particular set of actions, does that imply a kind of afterlife that is not a heaven or a hell, but a personalized eternal prison? Is Dr. Croft's spirit doomed to forever be the scientist, the observer, driven by the same perverse curiosity that defined his life, unable to move on, unable to stop, forever reaching out from the cold to feel the last breath of the living? And if you have been one of his subjects, has his clinical gaze now been turned upon you specifically? The knowledge that Dr. Croft's spectral presence was tied to the act of observation, not just to the lab, was a terrifying but still abstract concept. It was something that happened there, in the controlled environment of the university, under the specific conditions of the sleep study. You could reason, or at least hope, that by removing yourself from that environment, you had removed yourself from the haunting. You could take comfort in the solid, familiar walls of your own home, the comforting chaos of your books and clothes, the mundane reality of your own bed. That comfort was about to be shattered. It starts subtly, a recurring feeling of being watched when you're home alone, which you dismiss as lingering paranoia from the events at the lab. You start leaving a light on in the hallway at night, something you haven't done since you were a child. Then comes the cold. You'll be sitting on your sofa, reading a book, and a sudden, localized chill will drift through the room, making you shiver, despite the thermostat being set to a comfortable temperature. You check the windows for drafts, but find none. It's a fleeting, ephemeral thing, easily explained away, but it's happening more often. Then, one night, it happens. You're lying in bed, drifting in that quiet, liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. The house is silent, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Your eyes are closed, but you are still aware. Suddenly, you feel it. The same, unmistakable pressure on your chest that you felt in the lab. It is not a dream. It is a physical sensation, a heavy, suffocating weight that sinks into your sternum, making it difficult to draw a full breath. A cold dread, colder than any draft, seeps into you, radiating outward from the point of pressure. Panic seizes you, your eyes fly open, The room is dark, but not completely. Moonlight filters through the window, casting familiar shadows on the walls. And in the center of the room, standing at the foot of your bed, is a shape. It's not solid. It's a column of deeper darkness against the gloom, a subtle distortion in the air, just as you saw on the thermal monitor. It is tall, man-shaped, and utterly still. It is observing you. You try to scream, but the sound dies in your throat, a choked, strangled gasp. You are paralyzed, pinned to your mattress not just by the weight on your chest, but by a primal fear that freezes every muscle in your body. This is no longer science. There are no monitors here, no doctor. Finch on an intercom. There is no question of equipment, malfunction, or hallucination. This is your bedroom. This is your reality. And it has been invaded. This terrifying phenomenon of a haunting seemingly following a person home from its original location is known in paranormal circles as attachment. It's a relatively rare but horrifying development. One of the most famous and chilling accounts is the story of the Smurl family in Pennsylvania in the 1972nd and 82nd. After moving into a house plagued by strange noises, smells, and physical manifestations, the family found that the activity was not confined to the home. Family members reported being physically assaulted and tormented by the unseen entities even when they were at work or staying at hotels. The haunting was no longer tied to the house on Chase Street. It was tied to them. You lie there, pinned and terrified. For what feels like an eternity, the dark shape doesn't move. It just watches its presence, a vortex of cold and silent malice. You are acutely aware of your own breathing, your own frantic heartbeat. You feel like a specimen under a microscope, your terror being clinically observed. You squeeze your eyes shut, a child's desperate defense against the monster in the room. You pray, you bargain, you focus every ounce of your will on the simple idea of this being over. And then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure vanishes. You gasp, taking in a deep, ragged breath that burns your lungs. Your eyes snap open. The shape is gone. The room is just a room again. The cold has dissipated, but the terror lingers, a toxic residue in the air. You don't sleep for the rest of the night. You sit with your back against the headboard, a lamp burning brightly, staring at the empty spot where it stood. The line has been crossed. Dr. Silas Croft, or whatever echo of him remains, is no longer confined to the university grounds. His clinical gaze has followed you. The implications are staggering. Your home, the one place you are meant to feel safe, is now just another potential laboratory. Your own bed is now the observation table. The next morning, you call Dr. Finch. Your voice is a wreck, a frantic, sleep-deprived mess. You tell him what happened. He listens in silence, and when you're done, there is a long pause on the other end of the line. When he finally speaks, his voice is grim, heavy with a weight you now understand is guilt. "I was afraid of this," he says softly. The act of observing you so intensely, of capturing your data, it might have focused his attention. Marcus Thorne dropped out of the university and moved 2 states away. Maybe he wasn't just fleeing a memory. Maybe he was trying to break the connection. The idea is terrifying, that by being the subject of such a perfect, technologically advanced observation, you have become a lightning rod for the entity. You were the clearest signal it had detected in a century. This experience raises the most personal and terrifying question of all. If a ghost can attach itself to you like a disease, if it can follow you, watch you, and touch you in the sanctuary of your own home, where can you possibly go to be safe? What do you do when you realize that you haven't just been haunted by a ghost, but that you, yourself, might have become the haunted house? The haunting at your home becomes the new, terrifying baseline. It's no longer a singular event to be analyzed, but a chronic condition to be endured. You stop telling people. How could you? The story is too insane, the reality too fragile. You exist in a state of constant low-grade dread, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. The cold spots, the feeling of being watched, the pressure on your chest as you try to sleep, they are no longer shocking intrusions, but a horrifying part of your nightly routine. You are exhausted, living on a knife's edge of fear and sleep deprivation. You feel utterly, terrifyingly alone. But you are not the only one for whom the obsession continues. Dr. Finch, consumed by a mixture of scientific curiosity and profound guilt over what he has unleashed upon you, has been spiraling. The university's official stance to bury the data and force him into a sabbatical hasn't silenced him. It has radicalized him. He sees the administration's denial not just as bureaucratic ass-covering, but as a dangerous, willful ignorance. He believes they are sitting on a phenomenon of world-altering significance, and their refusal to investigate it is a betrayal of the scientific ethos itself. His career is in ruins. His reputation is shattered. He has lost everything that once defined him. All he has left is the mystery. One evening, nearly a month after the entity first followed you home, he calls you, but this time, his voice is different. The frantic, ragged edge is gone, replaced by a strange, unnerving calm. It's the calm of a man who has made a decision, who has passed through the storm of fear and doubt and arrived at a place of resolute, if reckless, purpose. I have to go back in, he says, his voice low and steady. I have to try to communicate with it directly. You protest, telling him it's too dangerous, that he needs to let it go. But it's like arguing with a tidal wave. Don't you see? He says, his voice filled with a feverish intensity. This is the most important discovery of our lifetime, of any lifetime. It's a conscious, intelligent, non-physical entity that is demonstrably interacting with our world. We have proof, but it's not enough. I need more. I need to know what it is. Why it's here. I have to ask it. He explains his plan, and it's a chilling portrait of a man pushed to the brink. He still has his old university keys. He knows the security patrol schedules. He knows the Kellerman building is mostly deserted late at night, especially now that the wing housing the sleep lab has been officially closed off for asbestos abatement, a convenient lie to keep people away. He plans to break into his own lab. He's not going to just observe this time, he's going to be the subject. He's going to wire himself up, lie on the bed, and instead of trying to sleep, he is going to attempt to provoke a direct response. He's going to call out to Dr. Croft in the darkness, scientist to scientist. This kind of obsessive return to the site of a haunting, especially by an investigator, is a rare but documented phenomenon. It speaks to a psychological state where the need for answers outweighs the instinct for self-preservation. It's reminiscent of the tragic case of Maurice Grosse, the lead investigator of the Enfield poltergeist case. Grosse became so deeply personally invested in the case, particularly in trying to help the young girl at the center of it, that he spent years of his life on it, enduring ridicule from skeptics and facing down terrifying phenomena, his health and personal life suffering immensely as a result. He couldn't let it go. The mystery had become part of him. Dr. Finch has reached that point. He believes he is the only one who can do this. He understands the history. He knows the trigger conditions. He feels a strange proprietary connection to the entity. He tells you not to worry, that he will be recording everything, that he has set up a system to live stream the data to a secure, off-site server. If something happens to me, he says with that same eerie calm, the data will be safe, the proof will be out there. The words are meant to be reassuring, but they send a sliver of ice through your veins. He is preparing for his own potential demise, as if it were just another variable in the experiment. The night he chooses is a Tuesday. He tells you the time he's going in. You spend the entire evening pacing your apartment, your phone clutched in your hand, fighting the urge to call the campus police and stop him. But what would you say? That your disgraced former professor is breaking into his old lab to talk to a ghost from the 19th century? They would think you are both insane. You are an unwilling, remote accomplice to his reckless quest. Late that night, an encrypted email arrives from him. It contains a single link. Your hands tremble as you click it. It takes you to a secure page, displaying a live feed from a single camera, the high-definition, black-and-white camera from the observation room, pointed at the bed. The room is dark, empty, but you can see the faint outline of the bed, the chair, the wires connecting the headboard to the wall. You are now the observer, sitting in your own silent, dark room, watching the feed. Then, a figure moves into the frame. It's Dr. Finch. He moves with a quiet, deliberate purpose. He takes off his jacket, revealing the EEG sensors already affixed to his own scalp. He sits on the bed and begins methodically connecting himself to the machines. When he's done, he takes a deep breath, lies back on the pillow, and stares up at the ceiling. He is now the bait. And you, hundreds of miles away, are the sole witness, watching on a cold screen, waiting for the ghost to come home. The live feed is a study in silent, minimalist horror. It's a single, static shot. The black and white image of the sealed room, with Dr. Finch lying motionless on the bed. There's no audio feed on the link he sent you, only the stark, clinical video. You are watching a man offer himself up as a sacrifice on the altar of his own obsession. The minutes tick by, stretching into an agonizing eternity. 10 minutes, 20. Nothing happens. The room remains still. Finch doesn't move. He is a man made of stone, waiting. You find yourself holding your breath, your eyes glued to the screen, scanning the shadowy corners of the room for any sign of distortion, any flicker of movement. Then, you see him take a breath. You can't hear the words, but you can see his lips move. He is speaking into the darkness. He is beginning the experiment. He lies still for another moment, then speaks again. A question, posed to the empty air. You can almost imagine the scene in the control room, the audio spectrogram registering his voice, while the rest of the instruments wait for a response from the silence. He is casting his line into the abyss, waiting for a bite. Suddenly, a flicker. It's not in the room itself, but on the feed. A brief moment of digital static, a horizontal line of distortion that jitters across the screen. You lean closer, your heart beginning to pound. Was it just a glitch in the live stream? A bandwidth issue? Then it happens again, more pronounced this time. A wave of static rolls across the image, making Finch's form shimmer and break apart for a fraction of a second. Something is interfering with the signal. You remember stories from paranormal research, particularly cases involving poltergeist activity, where electronic equipment is notoriously prone to inexplicable failure. Batteries will drain in an instant, cameras will shut off, and audio recorders will capture nothing but static precisely at the moment of peak activity. It's a phenomenon so common it has its own name, the EMF drain or static field theory, the idea that a supernatural entity requires ambient energy to manifest, and it pulls that energy from the most convenient sources like the batteries and electrical signals of nearby devices. Finch lies still on the bed, seemingly unaware of the feed's corruption. Then, you see him tense. His body goes rigid. His head turns slightly, as if he's listening to something you can't hear. His lips part, and he speaks again. A single, sharp word this time. He is responding to something. Something has answered him. The static on the feed intensifies. The image begins to stutter, freezing and unfreezing. And in the corner of the room, near the foot of the bed, you see it. It's not the vague, heatless distortion from the thermal camera this time. On the standard high-definition feed, a shadow begins to coalesce. It's a deep, unnatural black, a patch of darkness that seems to drink the infrared light the camera relies on to see in the dark. It gathers itself, pulling the shadows of the room into its form, rising from the floor like a plume of black smoke. It takes on a familiar, terrifying shape, tall, gaunt, human. Dr. Finch is no longer lying down. He has pushed himself up into a sitting position, his back against the wall. He is staring directly at the shape, his face a mask of what looks like horrified, ecstatic revelation. He is seeing it, not on a monitor, not as a data point, but with his own two eyes. The thing he's been hunting is standing in the room with him. The entity drifts forward, moving with a silent, unnatural grace. It stops at the foot of the bed. Finch does not recoil. He does not scream. He leans forward, his lips moving again, asking another question. This is the moment he has been working towards, the culmination of his life's ruin and his singular obsession. It is a terrifying tableau. The disgraced scientist cross-examining a ghost. And then the entity responds. The video feed corrupts completely, dissolving into a screeching wall of white noise and static. But just before it cuts out entirely, the audio from Finch's laptop, which he must have left open on the control room desk, somehow hijacks the feed for a single, horrifying second. The sound that rips through your speakers is not the low, guttural whisper from the previous recording. It is a clear, intelligent, and utterly malevolent voice. A voice that is both ancient and immediate. A voice that slices through the static like a shard of ice. It says 2 words. Get out. The voice is not a whisper. It is a command. It is steeped in a possessive, territorial fury. It is the sound of a predator whose hunting ground has been invaded. Then, the feed dies completely, replaced by a black screen with white text. Stream offline. You sit there, staring at the dead screen, the 2 words echoing in the silent, oppressive space of your own apartment. The clarity of it is the most shocking part. The directness. This was not a mindless echo or a fragmented piece of residual energy. It was a direct, intelligent, and hostile communication. It was a conscious entity, aware of Finch's intrusion and expressing its rage with perfect, chilling clarity. This is the holy grail for EVP researchers, a Class A direct response, where a spirit answers a direct question in a clear, audible voice. But this was no faint whisper from the static. This was a shout from the abyss. You try to call Finch's phone. It goes straight to voicemail. You try again and again. Nothing. You are left alone with the terrifying finality of that voice and the dead screen. He had gone seeking communication, and he had found it. He had wanted to ask the entity questions, but it seems the entity was the one to end the conversation. The ultimate question now hangs in the terrifying silence. What happens to a person who ignores such a clear and powerful warning? What does a ghost, a possessive and ancient thing like Silas Croft, do to a trespasser who has not only entered his laboratory, but has tried to put him under a microscope? The silence that follows the dead live stream is a suffocating blanket. The 2 words, "Get out," hang in your apartment, an auditory afterimage burned into your memory. For the rest of the night, you are a ghost in your own home, pacing, checking your phone, staring at the blank computer screen as if willing it to flicker back to life. It never does. Morning comes, gray and indifferent, bringing no relief, only a stark, sleep-deprived clarity. Dr. Finch is gone. He has crossed a line from which there may be no return. Your first instinct is to call the police, to report him missing, but you stop yourself, the words dying before you even pick up the phone. What would the story be? You'd be admitting your part in his illegal entry into the lab. You'd have to explain the live stream, the voice, the shadow. You'd be implicating yourself in the delusions of a man who was already disgraced and considered unstable by the university. They would never believe you. The official narrative was already written. Dr. Finch, suffering a mental breakdown after his suspension, disappeared. The story would be a sad, cautionary tale for the University Gazette, not a police investigation into a supernatural event. Days turn into a week. Dr. Finch does not reappear. His car is found parked a few blocks from campus, exactly where he told you he would leave it. The university administration, when questioned by the few local reporters who pick up on the story of a missing professor, issues a tight-lipped statement about respecting the privacy of Dr. Finch's family during this difficult time. They mention his recent sabbatical, subtly painting a picture of a man under immense personal stress. They are burying him just as they buried the data. It's the university itself that makes the final, definitive move. About 2 weeks after Finch's disappearance, a new set of construction permits appear on the Campus Planning Board's website. They are for the permanent decommissioning of laboratory facilities in the Kellerman Building's West Wing. The reason cited is the original fabrication, asbestos. The plan is not for removal and renovation. It is for sealing the area. They are building new walls, rerouting ventilation, and removing the entire section from the building's accessible floor plan. The sleep lab, the control room, the entire site of the haunting is being entombed. They are turning the entire wing into a concrete and drywall sarcophagus. This act of sealing off a haunted location is a surprisingly common, if drastic, response to a persistent and malevolent haunting. It is a modern, secular version of an exorcism. When spiritual solutions fail or are not an option, the physical one remains. It's the story of the infamous A75 road in Scotland, where so many drivers reported terrifying apparitions that locals simply began avoiding it, effectively sealing it off by superstition. In some extreme cases, houses with intractable poltergeist activity have been bought by paranormal research groups or even concerned municipalities simply to be torn down, erasing the location from the map in the hopes of dispersing the energy tied to it. The university is doing the same, but with bureaucratic efficiency. They are not admitting to a ghost. They are citing a building code violation. They are solving a supernatural problem with a mundane solution. You walk to the Kellerman building one last time. You see the construction crews, the plastic sheeting, the signs warning of a hazardous environment. You watch as they erect a new wall in the middle of the long, sterile corridor, right where the entrance to the lab wing used to be. There is no door, no handle, no lock. It is a seamless, permanent barrier. Behind that wall, the room where you were watched, where Finch confronted the entity, will sit in silent, perpetual darkness. All the equipment, the monitors, the bed, the sensors, all of it is being left inside. A time capsule of terror. The finality of it is chilling. The university, in its attempt to protect itself, has made a monumental decision. They have chosen to contain the phenomenon rather than understand it. They have prioritized silence over safety, reputation over truth. By sealing the room, they have tacitly admitted that they believe something is in there, something they are so afraid of that their only solution is to wall it up and pretend it doesn't exist. They have buried the discovery of a lifetime. You are now the sole living witness to the entire event, the participant, the one who was watched, the one who spoke to the obsessed researcher, the one who saw the final, terrifying live stream. The data on Finch's off-site server is likely lost to time, a digital ghost in a machine no one will ever access. The physical evidence is now entombed behind a wall of concrete and lies. All that remains is you, and the things that have followed you home. The university has sealed its ghost away, but you cannot build a wall around your own life. This act of institutional burial leaves you with the most isolating and terrifying question of the entire ordeal. When the official record is erased and all other witnesses are gone or entombed, what happens to the truth? Does it cease to exist, or does it live on a silent, screaming passenger? Inside the one person left who remembers. The new wall in the Kellerman building is a monument to denial, a smooth, blank surface where a door used to be. It is the end of the story for the university. For you, it is simply confirmation that you are permanently on your own. The ghost is entombed, the researcher is gone, and the evidence is buried under concrete and bureaucracy. But the echo of the event, the resonance of that cold, clinical observation, cannot be walled up so easily. It has found a new home. It lives in you. Your life is now divided into two distinct periods: before the sleep study and after. The after is a landscape of perpetual twilight, a place where true rest is a distant memory. The insomnia you once hoped to cure has become your only defense mechanism. It's no longer a matter of not being able to sleep. It's a conscious, nightly refusal to do so. To sleep is to become vulnerable. To sleep is to open the door, and you now know what waits on the other side. You live your life in a state of managed exhaustion, fueled by caffeine and fear. Your nights spent reading, watching old movies, doing anything to keep your conscious mind tethered to the waking world until the safety of dawn. The overt manifestations have mostly ceased. The dark shape no longer stands at the foot of your bed, and the suffocating pressure on your chest has receded. But the silence it left behind is, in many ways, worse. The haunting has become atmospheric. It's a constant, low-level hum of dread, a feeling of being perpetually watched that has seeped into the very fabric of your existence. This is a recognized psychological state known as hypervigilance, a key symptom of deep trauma. It's the brain's response to a severe threat, ramping up your sensory sensitivity to an unbearable degree. Every creak of your apartment building settling, every whisper of wind against the window pane, every shadow cast by passing headlights is now filtered through the terrifying possibility that it is him. Your own home has become a hostile environment, and you are its only sleepless sentinel. You've read about the stone tape theory, a hypothesis from the paranormal world that suggests strong emotional or traumatic events can be imprinted onto the environment, especially on materials like stone or water. The theory posits that these locations can then act like a psychic recording, replaying the event for sensitive individuals for years, even centuries to come. The university, by sealing the lab, essentially locked away the stone tape, but you've come to believe they were wrong about the medium. Dr. Croft's malevolent, obsessive energy wasn't just recorded onto the infirmary grounds or the laboratory equipment. Through the intense, focused, and technologically amplified act of observation, the recording was imprinted onto you. You are the living stone tape, carrying the psychic data of a 19th century monster within you. And every time you approach the vulnerable state of sleep, you risk playing it back. You never hear from Dr. Finch again. He is a ghost of a different kind now, a memory that haunts you with his reckless pursuit of a truth that ultimately consumed him. You sometimes wonder if he found the answers he was looking for in those final, unrecorded moments in the lab, or if he simply became another specimen for Croft's collection, his final, terrified breath just another piece of data for the entity's eternal, pointless research. You will never know. His story ends with a dead live stream and 2 words of furious, possessive rage. Your story continues in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, when the world sleeps and you do not. You are left with the permanent, unshakable knowledge that the tidy, rational world we have built for ourselves is a thin, fragile veneer. You know that science, with all its tools and metrics, can sometimes do nothing more than provide a clearer picture of the monster in the dark before the feed cuts out. And so you sit, night after night, with a lamp on, a book in your lap, waiting for the Sunday. You are left with a quiet, lingering echo in the void of your own life, and a question that will follow you for all of your remaining days. What is it, exactly, that we invite into the silence when we close our eyes and promise to be still? And so, the story of the sleep study concludes, not with a resolution, but with a permanent, unsettling resonance that was left upon a single human life. It fades into the larger tapestry of inexplicable events that linger at the edges of our understanding, a chilling reminder that the most profound mysteries are often not found in distant, haunted castles or ancient burial grounds, but in the quiet, mundane spaces we inhabit every day, and most terrifyingly, every night. The narrative of Dr. Silas Croft and his unending research serves as a stark metaphor for the unsettling truth that our most vulnerable moments, those moments of sleep when we surrender our consciousness, might also be moments of profound exposure to things that exist just outside the narrow spectrum of our perception. It's a thought that quietly undermines the very notion of rest, suggesting that the silence we seek for peace might, for other unseen observers, be the perfect laboratory condition. As you prepare to enter that space tonight, perhaps consider the possibility that the darkness is not empty, but is simply waiting, with a clinical and timeless patience, for you to begin the experiment.